Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this third session of the IIA Bombay Annual Conference 2020-2021. Before I start off this panel, I just want to remind everybody of the leaderboard that is on right now. I'm looking at it as we speak, and at the moment, Neha Pansari is leading that. Essentially, if you go on to the reception area of the conference website that you're entered, you'll see a little sort of cup sign at the top right. And if you click on that, it sort of gives you all the ways in which you can earn these leaderboard points. One of which is going to be to ask questions as the panels are being sort of played out, right? So the reason why I said this is to encourage all of you all to put in your questions for this panel as well, so that once we conclude with the formal session of the panel, Dhrubo can actually put those questions on to the panel as well. So with that, let me introduce our moderator for this session, which is on for the next decade. I'm pleased to introduce Dhrubabrata Ghosh, or Dhrubo as he's popularly called. Dhrubo is the Managing Director of Data and Digital at Protiviti, one of our sponsor partners. And he's got more than about 14 years of experience in the digital and the CIO advisory services, and essentially leads their automation, predictive modeling, data science, revenue assurance, fraud analytics services, and obviously has worked across a range of sectors, including telecom, media, financial services, so on and so forth. Prior to Protiviti, Dhrubo worked with PricewaterhouseCoopers, Connectiva Services, and Synopsys. So with that, I'm hand over the mic to Dhruba to take it on from here. Over to you, Dhruba.
Thank you, Bhushan, and good afternoon, everyone. I know we have a very short time, so let me welcome the panel that we have. I am joined today with Mr. Naval Kishore Bajaj. He's the Head of Corporate Audit and Assurance for Yokogawa India Limited. Naval is a Chartered Accountant, a Certified Internal Auditor, a Certified Information System Auditor, and a Forensic Accountant. He is responsible to provide assurance to the board on internal audit, enterprise risk management, JSOX, and IFC for all operations in India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. In his 15 years of work experience, he has worked with multiple industries such as industry automation engineering, automobile, IT/ITES, telecom, FMCG, and foreign exchange. Naval is a member of the expert study groups of ICI, making and revising the standards on internal auditing and standards on forensic accounting and investigation. In his personal capacity, he is also serving as the president of Bangalore chapter of Bhartiya Vitta Salahakar Samiti, a leading think tank of finance professionals, which advises government on various policy matters related to the economy, corporate governance, and taxation. Naval is a regular speaker at many reputed forums, and he also shares the knowledge across prominent educational institutions. Welcome, Naval, to the panel.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I also have Mr. Kartikeya Nath. He's the Chief Risk Officer for Jindal Steel and Power Limited. He's an experienced finance and business professional with expertise in the areas of governance, risk, and ethics. And he has worked with the Big Four consulting firms. Currently, he's serving as the Group CRO and the CAE with responsibility to oversee internal audit and risk management for India and overseas. He has a diverse industry knowledge across FMCG, white goods, e-commerce, banking, infrastructure, metal and mining industries, oil and gas, and telecom, with a rich experience of working with multicultural teams in APAC, ASEAN, Americas, and European region. A chartered accountant by qualification, He is recognized as a technical specialist on enterprise risk management by the Institute of Risk Management. Kartikeya is also in the advisory board of the Institute of Risk Management UK, India, member of the ASSOCHAM National Council for Corporate Fraud and Internal Audit, and an active participant as panelist in conferences and seminars on governance, risk, and internal audit. Welcome, Kartikeya, to the panel.
Thank you, Dhruba. It's a pleasure to be here.
And finally, we have Sanjay Mathur. He's the Vice President for Governance, Risk Management, and Compliance for Tata Communications. Sanjay is an expert in corporate governance, ethics, and fraud investigations, integrated risk management, internal audit, SOX and IFC compliance, as well as revenue assurance. He's a cost and management accountant India, a certified management accountant Australia, and a certified fraud examiner US. He has completed his executive education from the Stephen M. Ross School of Business of the University of Michigan and trained the trainer for crucial conversations. He is currently leading the governance, risk management, and compliance function at Tata Communications. He has a rich experience of around 25 years in both the manufacturing and services industries, working with the Fortune 500 companies like the Monsanto Chemicals and Shell Petroleum, and esteemed Indian conglomerates like Tata Communications, Reliance Communications, and Ranbaxy. In his current role, he has been focusing on providing digital solution based on advanced analytics and RPA in the areas of internal audit, risk, and continuous fraud monitoring. Welcome, Sanjay, to the panel as well.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be part of this esteemed planner.
And thank you, all of you, for making the time from your busy schedule. It's an honor to be the moderator of such an esteemed panel. And this is a topic which is very close to my heart, right? Since the time we have started the journey of using audit or audit analytics, we have come a long way through. We, in today's day, talk about the next generation of internal audit. And when we talk about the next generation of internal audit, it actually talks about a complete change in the mindset for the internal audit community, right? And what we would like to get is the initial opinion from each one of you as to how you envisage the next decade of internal audit. How do you see that internal audit as a function moves away from just being an assurance provider to a strategic partner for the rest of the organizations? So let me start with Sanjay, you, as to how we see the next generation or the next decade of internal audit.
Yeah, thanks, Udua. Now, before I respond to your question about the next decade, let me take a step back and let's understand how the internal audit functions has evolved in the last couple of years. And I don't want to go far away, but let's take example in 2002 when the Sarbanes-Oxley came into practice. The role of the internal audit started moving, changing even year after year. Before that, the role of the internal audit was purely conducting some internal audit, reporting to the audit committee and to the management. But after SOX, if you see, the role has evolved. It has moved from a compliance role, then it has moved to start focusing on IT. Then it has started moving from data analytical, cyber security. So if you see, the role of the internal auditor as a purely internal auditor has moved into an assurance provider. And I will use the term in integrated assurance provider because in many organizations, you will see that the different maturity of level was there. So the IT, cyber security, all that required together. So that has moved from a pure internal auditor role to an assurance provider. And then it in some places, it has gone to integrated assurance provider. But now, if you see, even in 1992, when the COSO framework first came into, and even if we sit today and you go and start analyzing this, you'll realize that many components are still as valid as we talked about years back and today. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that the next 10 years will be a more of an implementation or adoption of all the things which is talked in the last 10 years. And but how this adoption will go, and how the business will review. So technically speaking, in last 10 years, especially in last 5 to 10 years, the external environment has also changed to a very great extent. When I talk about the external environment, means the regulator has put a lot of restrictions on the companies, which is driven by the regulations of various different regulations across the globe. So the role of the internal auditor will be, in my view, in next 10, 20 years, will be one of adoption of all the technology or the changes which has been done. But the key role will be like a business enabler or a business advisor, and which is like, reviewing the process in advance, identifying the possible the leakage, and then trying to, rather than waiting for the internal auditor, which is historically was a proactive. So this may move from a reactive to proactive and to a predictive. So that's the first business enabler role will has to play. But at the same time, it will be more of a compliance watchdog, because many regulator has also put a lot of emphasis on the compliance part, which need to be reviewed on a regular basis by a third party. So I think the role will be both a business advisor role. If I conclude my remark, I'll say the business advisor role as well as a watchdog role, which is typically lying on the compliance watchdog role. So these two are the key kind of a role which any CA is going to play in next couple of years. Now, how he has to play this, what all things will be required him to change the mindset, how all the culture need to be shift and change. I think that's a hell lot of things will we need to be put into place before you start playing these two different roles. So I'll take a pause here, and this is my message from me is like, it's a business enabler and compliance watchdog.
Thank you, Sanjay. I'll move on to Kartikeya and take your viewpoint as to how you see, do you see just as an enabler, as a watchdog, or you see something quite different as the next decade?
Thanks, Dhruva. And thanks, Sanjay. You had a very pertinent points which were spoken about. So when we talk about an internal audit department, so there's not much left in a business that we do not touch. And so among the few things that we can talk about, will be talk about assurance and improvement of the operations. We could be considered as an advisor to the business leaders, and nonetheless as a through nefarious fraudsters also. So these are the various aspects that we keep on doing. But if I talk in a pertinent situation today, there have been always the three principles of an internal audit. And they have to be just added with certain suffix when we move toward the next generation or the new decade. So three principles have always been assure, advise, and anticipate. So if I talk about assure, I think we put a suffix with assure as a flexibility. So we need to be more flexible to address business dynamics which are ever changing. For example, if you see today, the certain economies which were the powerhouses over the period of time in last 12 months are still not being able to come out of the recession they have gone through. So we need to be more flexible in our approach, what we're going to do, because we are now, it's the organization which work into various geographies with various political, social impacts and economic impacts. Second is when we talk about as an advisor, I like to put a suffix as a proactive advisor. So we should be able to, as an internal auditor, should be able to paint a bigger picture. And how it is possible? It's only possible when we have more real-time governance assessment, process and control design advocacy. And for this, we have to go to the third core principle of internal audit, that is anticipate. And when we talk about anticipate, I use a suffix with anticipate now to innovate. So when we're talking about current scenario, there are a lot of things that we will talk about, real-time monitoring, analytics, visualization, benchmarking, and behavior analysis. What various technical tools will provide us. But now the most important thing, which as an auditor we have to be innovative, is to audit the word disruption itself. There's so much of a disruption which is coming in the business environment. If you are not innovative enough to audit that disruption, because nowadays every second day you have a new business idea which is so rapidly implemented that is not tested against the controls and the risk around it. So as an internal auditor, we have to be more apt and more enabled to audit the disruption. That is my take overall, and other panelists can further add on it.
Thanks, Kartikeya. Naval, let's take your viewpoint as to how you see it changing and what do you see the change is going to impact internal audit.
Thanks, Dhruvo. I think I'll just complement what Sanjay and Kartikeya has beautifully tried to explain. And as they said, that internal audit is part of the overall ecosystem, or we are not aloof from others. And if we try to actually study from the systems point of view, then we will come a little later. The other enablers, or other parts of our ecosystem in an organization or in the industry, they would have done some few things, or they would have been already impacted by few things, and that is how now internal audit needs to adapt to those things. So given that background, I would also like to mention that when we try to foresee for the next decade, we also need to look at what has happened in the last decade. I was just once you got me on board, it was very interesting for me to go back and look at some of my documents which were dated like 2010 and 2012, 12 and 13, and a lot of research papers, studies which used to talk about hot topics of this year. This is a traditional white paper which a lot of consulting firms will give you. And I could see that there are new answers to old questions, and then there are new answers to new questions. So everyone knows that in a manufacturing setup, for example, as Kartika would relate to it, that availability, safety and security, this is an evergreen question which will always remain to be for for the times to come, but the ways and methodology related to that will be different. Now, with the current technology, earlier the technology was focusing on the efficiency side. Now, when we are talking about robotics, AI, data analytics, big data being there, worlds of information technology and operational technology are converging. Now we are talking about the top managements being able to see the operational, technology data of the plant operation at their phone in a real-time basis. This is happening because of the cloud, being integrated to these kind of systems, which was never in place. This exposes you to a different kind of risk. Now, what I'm trying to, highlight here is that while in some papers of 10 years back, we used to talk about risk assessment. Yes, we will continue to talk about risk assessment for next 10 years. Earlier it was annual. Now maybe some organizations are doing quarterly or half yearly. Some of them have automated it, but going forward, it may be real time. We were always talking about audit planning based on competencies. Now it is more risk focused, and going forward, it may be, agile risk auditing. Earlier, we were talking about static internal audit teams, co-sourcing models and all that. Now going forward, already we are talking about agile auditing, and going forward, we could have scenarios where, it could be even more, flexible than what it is right now. Earlier focus on finance and accounting was already there. It will continue to be there because it is a legal mandate. But now, as we all see right now, we are seeing a focus on risk management, cyber security, social media risks. Going forward, when everything IIoT and all these things are going to be in place, I feel that internal audit competencies will be more and more required on the digital side. So, net, what I'm trying to, arrive at is that basically the internal auditor of future, of say next 10 years, if, I perceive myself at least, it is no longer, the big beating the small, but the fast beating the slow. So that means basically the debate about, pre-implementation reviews or post-implementation reviews, the conflict of interest, whether we should be part of the doer, as Sanjay mentioned, we are more in an advisory role going forward. That all is gone, because if you are not involved in a, say, for example, in a RPA which is being developed, which will impact your accounting or some other critical process, and later on, you find some critical risk coming out of that, then you are also a failure. So these are just few examples in my mind, based on which I can say that even I can foresee for next decade, accounting standards, our auditing standards, they are also going in for change. I can see our certifications of CIA and, and other IA related certifications will go for a change. And one more thing which I think I can foresee, that internal auditors will need not only digital knowledge but also legal knowledge going forward. That is my take on this. Back to you.
Thanks, Naval. And I think you touched upon one very pertinent point, right? Things are going digital. And I think each one of you touched upon innovation, disruption, adoption of technology. So let me bring that point back into the discussion. And Kartikeya, I just want to understand from you that in today's world, when technologies or resources is something which is going to define this next decade, how do you see, or what do you see these technologies or resources would play a role? Or what technologies or resources you think is going to make a difference?
Thanks, Dhruvo. So, Dhruvo, when we talk about, I think over the period of time, whenever we go in any of these seminars or any of the conversation we have been talking a lot about the technical aspects, that we will have data analytics, we'll have RPAs, we have XYZ kind of an automation. So, what I perceive it as, so if you go past and say in 1990s, so there was a thought that a chartered accountant or an Institute of Internal Auditors certified guy will be doing an audit. In 2000, we started talking about now we need to understand a business better. So we need to have more MBAs and the lawyers and the people who understand the legal jargons to come and join the internal audit teams. So now when we are talking about in 2020-21, we are talking about a new resource which will enable the further audit. So that is the digitization and technical aspects. But when we talk about this, of course, a technical technology and adoption of all these things will be most important resource. But when we talk about this, we need to have a good mix of these resources. And the good mix of resources means we need to have more flexible and agile team model available within the organization. So when we talk about, so I divide it into appropriate automation and flexible team models. So let's talk about the flexible team model first of all. If you would have read yesterday's Times of India, it talks about temporary CXOs on hire. So when we talk about temporary CXOs, then I think all of us who are sitting here as in a CAE or a CRO, we are all CXOs. So tomorrow we are talking about a temp CXO or a temp CAE or a temp CRO being replaced with replacing us in the organization. So what does that means? So you need to have a flexible team. So the flexible teams, you need to have one core audit team to maintain the continuity across the organization. Because when we talk about organization which have a multiple businesses, which have a more complex manufacturing sites, they need to have a continuity of business. Because whenever we even talk about a core sourcing model, we tell to our consultants, I need to have a repeat team coming to my office because I don't have a luxury to explain it again to everyone. So one thing which is going to stay all the time is the continuity of the team. Then we talk about a subject matter expert which will come in. Now I move to an appropriate automation. So if you're talking about an appropriate automation, I never say a automation or an RPA or a digitization. Every organization have a different level of an optimization of an automation which will serve them. And the automation is a pill which need to be revisited or reassessed very quick and fast in this disruptive environment. So even if you talk about any kind of analytical tool, may it be based on SQL, R, Python, or any visualization, whether it's based on the Tableau, your BI, or any RPA you are talking about. One of the most important aspect will be to reassess, revisit, and revitalize that automation very quick and fast. Because after every month or after a quarter, because the type of disruptions we are seeing, the things is gonna be a garbage in and garbage out kind of a situation if you don't update it over the period of time. So you need to have a very strong functional team to visualize, and you need to have a very strong technical team to translate. So that is what my thought was. So I think these two resources has to be appropriately optimized in the organization. So going forward, having a efficient audit and a structured audit or a structured risk management practice to sustain in an organization. That is my view on that.
No, I completely relate to that, right? So our technical team without the functional side and the functional side without the technical team in today's day perhaps is the wrong combination to have.
So it is the right mix.
It's a right mix, and not having that combination is the wrong thing to do. You're right.
Yeah.
So coming to Sanjay, because Sanjay, you in your organization, you have talked about doing RPA, doing all kinds of automation. How do you see uh, this enabling technology playing a role in today's day, and how you think that it's going to change uh, in your organization or any organization?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting questions, and let me take you through back around 2 3 years back, when as an organization we started business transformations, and so lot of new technology was start put across all our business. And at that point of time, the CEO's statement to me as an internal auditor was saying that you can't sit at the fence and play the game. So if you have to play the game, you need to be part of the game. So you can't sit outside and just look and say, okay, once everything complete, I will see the design and I will tell you what is the missing part and how do you bridge this. So you say you need to be part of this transformation. You need to come inside and start playing. So that somewhere again regenerate with what point I was saying as a business enabler or an advisor. Of course, keeping the independency and the objectivity keep into mind. But that what it mean for internal audit is that we started thinking that okay, the new technology, how do we as an internal audit can put the control in place? And the most important aspect is come how can we play as a line of defense 2 or 3 or 1 in different places. So whether we are a line of defense of 1 2 and 3, various controls and the check and balance which was decided, that I think that the era is gone when that the control review will be performed by only internal auditor. The way the design has to be put in place that it can be automatically can detected by next level of management itself, not even waiting for the third line of defense to come and exit. So various controls we started putting back on the technology, and rightly Kartikeyan says that the mix of knowledge which you need is business knowledge plus the technology which is put in place, and the third is the audit knowledge. So what we as an internal audit or a CRO which brings into table is the different perspective of a risk which is not been seen or which is not been put emphasis by business on a routine basis. So the combination of three put together, we started building few controls at the first place itself, which is the fundamental principle of the SOX when it comes that the control should be exist at the first place. It should not be at a level 2 or level 3. So the technology is, I'll say that often people feel that RPA is internal auditor can driven, but RPA internal auditor can only be driven if the technology has been used in a way that it is there in the organization. And if I take you some statistics which we pulled out 3 years back when we were going in implementing, most of the organizations the financial reporting control, I just given one set of statistics, around 70 to 80% of the financial information control or IFC related control was manual. And I'm not talking about particularly about my company, but that was the statistics that time available. So that means you can't put any automated control over that. So what need to change is the fundamental, the way the control is being performed, the way the documentation and the other evidence which is kept for the auditor to review. So this goes on hands and hands with the business improvement of the transformation. So that's the first step I'll say, which is, and it's a journey. So we are still passing through that journey. So that's the first part. The second part, which comes on the upskill of the internal auditor itself. So typically, as Kartikeya also rightly mentioned, that the internal auditor was considered to be a chartered accountant or an engineer who will come and do the audit. But now the most important aspect which comes into understanding of not only business plus the technology. So how do we upskill? So there are two aspects. One is that there are readily skill available outside the company, which is like all the consultants who provide. But the second emphasis was in the company itself. Can we turn the ball, and can some of the technical person or the business people can learn the audit skill, and can they also play both the roles? So like many companies does is a rotational internal auditor program or the guest auditor program, whatever the name you call. But basically it's not only upskilling the internal auditor to understand business, but upskilling the business to understand the importance of the risk and the governance and the audit. So then it is at a real time can be identify and close. So I will say that just to conclude my point one, I'll say that we need to play within. We can't play at sitting at the fence and start talking about the gaps in the process. And then secondly, we need to also reverse the role. Some of the business need to also understand the governance portion and continuously provide them the training and facilitate them to understand so they can, when they go back to their work, they can implement that easily.
No, a well-mentioned point. Again, that marriage between the functional and the technical side needs to happen. And I believe it's a change, right? It's
Absolutely.
a change which needs to happen, and it's not necessarily uh, that technology would do everything. Technology is just an enabler. There has to be some amount of methodology which needs to be put in place, some kind of governance which needs to put into place. So Naval, coming to you, right? In today's day, what do you see is the change which is required? Change which is required for the adoption, the changes in the methodologies that would finally help the internal auditor bridge that gap or kind of become the enabler within the organization?
That's a very good question. Thank you for asking that, Dhrubo. The change which is required, I think I will start with, some things which should not be changed. So, for example, trust factor, you have to gain the trust, you have to build that relationship, you need to continue, getting the right level of business knowledge. And as Sanjay and Kartikeya highlighted, we need to be in the game to be able to add value. All that will continue as it is. There are studies which are talking about internal audit and lawyers and other professionals going down in a job market because of the automation. I'll share my perspective. Honestly, I don't believe that that is going to happen. In fact, I feel the way at least the Indian regulators are behaving, and the way a lot of focus is being put on the corporate governance side, especially in the companies where public use of fund is happening. I feel that internal audit is going to be more and more in focus. In fact, I'm expecting regulations to become even more stricter. Given that regulators are moving to data analytics on their own part, they are finding a lot of stuff by comparing their own departmental data and then sending out notices to companies. I think it is high time that all those things are taken care within the companies. So what I want to say is that the old concept of assurance map, which ensures that the audit committee and the board is getting the right level of assurance in all the key topics, becomes even more critical, and internal audit's involvement in majority of those topics continues to be critical. Now, having said that, given that the change in the technology side, so many changes happening almost on daily basis. Still, the bottom line questions remain the same. How to reduce downtime, how to decrease costs, how to increase ROI, all that is continuing to be the same. Budgets are going to be prepared in the same way, and management targets are there for in the same way. Now, only the methods of achieving those in the business will change. Now, being in internal audit, how we can actually come up to the speed, that is the question. So the question is like, let's see, you know, how we were doing sampling earlier and how it is being done now. I'm sure a lot of organizations have already reached a stage where you are not doing any sampling. You are having predictive data analytics tools in place, or even if not tools, at least you are doing it on Excel and then trying to find out, okay, the problem is about to happen, let us alert the right process owner immediately. And as one of the leading internal audit heads I was listening, he made a very good point. I would like to quote him. He said that anything which can be automated, anything which can be automated and which can be found by internal audit by analysis of data, why should it not be highlighted by internal audit and given it to the process owner so that they can build it as part of their own controls? I think that is the way to go. Although you might feel that later on how we will find mistakes, but don't worry about that, my friends. I feel mistakes will continue to happen. Processes will keep changing. Policies will keep changing. But our job is to basically prevent the going forward. Our role is to prevent the things to happen. I think that is how we will add value. Another thing which we, I would like to highlight here is that I can foresee that, as I mentioned earlier, standards are also going to change. Right now, if you look at internal auditing standards, there will be one standard which will talk about auditing in a technology environment, which is only talking about if you are having an ERP environment in place, then how you are going to audit it. I think the entire standard will need to change, and they will talk about how to use technology to do audit. And a lot of red flags, green flags, those terminologies will be more and more in use. So if you ask me, to conclude my response, how to basically go forward and add value in the changing environment, as other panelists have also mentioned, number is to upskill. Number one is to upskill yourself. Number two is to continue what you have been doing in the past, work with them, attain business knowledge, build that trust. And third is to add value by sharing the predictive analysis that you are either doing on two or otherwise. Back to you, Dhruva.
Thanks, Naval. And I think we had only 45 minutes, right? And we had crossed that 40 minutes just to get that initial impression from all of you guys. I'll take some final thoughts from Kartikeya and Sanjay before we open it up for Q&A. So Kartikeya, how do you see these methodologies or these governance playing a part in today's world? You summarized or you talked about earlier, right? Assure, advise, anticipate. So your thoughts, your final.
So that those 3 A's will stay forever. Those 3 A's are not going anywhere, Dhruva. But if I see what is the goal I set up for me, for our organization, is that I don't want to issue a quarterly report of more than 5 pages. I don't want to issue a more than 5 pages audit report. The 5 pages audit report means the issues that matter are to be audited. Rest all has to be self-monitored. Now I'm talking about an integrated audit kind of a situation. So all the compliances issues which I know is to be reviewed, need to be automated and has to be sent on a periodic basis to the process owners, and they need to respond so that a corrective action could be taken before the period end. I'm not at all interested anyways to put that on a piece of paper and see that I found that they have not complied. So it has to be an integrated audit shift. 5-page audit report from the 50-page audit report. Second, we as an auditors need to be more nimble on the feet. There is nothing called as an audit plan. which is prepared on the 1st of April or the 1st of January. Your audit plan need to change every day because we are living in the world of disruption. Everything is changing overnight. So need to be nimble. And the third is when we are talking about audit disruptions. If you don't audit disruptions in your organization in current scenario, I'm 110% sure we will be missing lot of things which will create a larger problem for the organization, not tomorrow, but for sure day after tomorrow.
Perfect.
So that is,
Thanks, Kartikeya.
thank you so much.
Sanjay, last couple of minutes to you, and
Absolutely.
then
So,
I will open up for the Q&A.
yeah, I'll not take much of the time, but yeah, Karthik has beautifully talked about the effective communications. So I think that's a very important aspect, which will be very relevant for all of us. That how do you communicate your audit observations to the management of the board? I just want to add one more point here, which is like when I start talking about the business enabler or adding working with the business, is like how much audit plan or whether you call audit area or the risk area, whatever you call, are aligned to the business vision, and how much bigger picture which we got into saying that achieve this business objective, these are the risks which we have, and not a basis on the reactive but more of a proactive and predictive basis, where we can go and say that this could impact the achievement of the goal, what kind of an integrated solution we can provide, whether it's a risk management, whether it's like a continuous monitoring. And interestingly, one of the key measure for the internal auditor going forward will be, especially the environment where I come from, is that how many control we have put back to the process owner to continuously monitor, and not like an internal auditor to monitor that. So that I think these are the concluding part from my side.
Thank you, Sanjay. And I think all three of you have touched upon the three aspects which we look at, right? The governance, which is the skill set of people, the vision of audit, the methodologies, whether it's continuous monitoring, whether it's the high impact reporting that Kartikeya talked about, or the agile auditing that you talked about. And finally, the enabling technologies. And I think enabling technologies is just the part and only an enabler. Perhaps the methodology and the governance is much to do with it. Thank you everyone for your time. I know it's very short time to do justice to such a topic of what we envisage 10 years down the line. I'll take a few questions which is coming up. So one of the questions is, will the implementation of AI, RPA, etc. in audit change the role of the physical auditors? And what will be the role in such situations? Naval, you would like to take? Please go ahead.
Yeah, so if I understand the question correctly, the question is talking about the methodology part of it. Certainly it will change. But for that, first of all, we need to understand, especially, at the deployment time itself, if the controls are tested properly, at least on the design level, if internal audit is involved, and you are confident about the design part, then you can be confident about the data part, which you can, later on audit. So certainly I will say 2 points. First is get involved at the pre-implementation stage itself, at least at the design level. And then certainly, look at the data also, because data will be available, more than it was in the past.
Thanks, Naval. The other question is, would the expectation of fraud identification and not the fraud indicators identification overtake the basic role of assurance of the internal controls and advisory role? So Sanjay would like.
I think, as Naval also mentioned that the institute or the other places that they are also reviewing the standards, because what we also need to understand that the standards were put in place 10 years ago with certain business environment. So now that has been changed. So that's a one aspect of it. But yes, coming to the point, I don't see that identification of a fraud area would come across into any assurance related part, because identification is anyways role of the internal auditor. Even that IFC control or SOX controls requires to identify what are the key fraud risks. So I don't see any conflicting part here. Whether other way, I will say that these two things goes well together if a very well clear boundaries are defined between these two roles. And to me, the internal audit focus more on the process side, but in the fraud, you will not only focus on the process, but you will also focus on that why it has happened and who all are involved in it. So I think it's a complete statement if you put both together.
Thanks, Sanjay. I'll take one last question, and Kartikeya, I'll send it towards you. Looking at how...
Sorry to interrupt. I'll just quickly add to what
Sure,
Sanjay
Naval.
said in this question. I'm sorry for this. See, there is a fear that is hidden in this question, what was asked to Sanjay. The only one-line answer is Dharmo Rakshiti Rakshita. If you follow your standards, you can justify yourself and you will be fine. Sorry for that. You can continue.
No problem. So, Kartikeya, last question of the panel. Looking at how things are moving towards agility and technology driving way, what are your thoughts about the possibility that we may not even have the 3 lines of defense in the next 1 decade, and we are going to reduce it to just 1? What are your thoughts? What do you believe? Is it possible? Does next 10 years gonna remove all the 3 lines of defense?
See, there is the previous question was about a fraud. So whenever there is a situation when you want to improve your process, your controls from any kind of interference or an attack on it, you need to improvise. So whatever type of an automation that you're gonna put across the organization, they are gonna be irrelevant very quick and fast because the way the automation is happening. So tomorrow, if you are planning to roll out one continuous monitoring program, it will be irrelevant day after tomorrow. So you need to have a functional experts always there. So anyone who thinks, I personally don't feel that we are going anywhere. The defense 1, 2, 3 all gonna stay. But it is a question, earlier you used to travel on a bicycle, then you used to travel on a motorcycle. Now you have a Ferrari to move around. But if I have a Ferrari in India, but if I don't have a road to travel on a Ferrari in India, then I think the decade for me to travel in Ferrari in India is going to take some time. But that's for sure that we are not going anywhere because the way the world is changing, every automation that you're going to put into place in any organization will be redundant day after tomorrow if you put it tomorrow. So it's only a time gap situation when you talk about an automation. It has to be continuous improvement all the time and every time. So all the defense facilities will stay according to me.
And I agree with all the panelists, right, that we are looking at a next decade where audit as a function is going to move from just an assurance provider to a strategic partner. And with the panelists like we have today, it's bound to happen, right? So the next decade is going to change how we do audit, but the auditors definitely are not going anywhere. And with that, I think we are almost over the hour. If it is okay, Burzin, do you think there are any other questions?
Thank you, Dhrubo, and thank you, panel members, Kartikeya, Naval, and Sanjay. I've often sort of said that, talking about the next decade and sort of doing some predictions in the future is often a very tricky business to put your neck out, right? Because there's a 50-50 chance that you could be right and you could be wrong, right? But I think that all 4 of you all have, put that out so very simply in terms that I guess all of us can identify with. So I must thank Dhrubo yourself for leading this discussion, as well as your panel members for their contributions. So with that, I would like to close this panel and invite all our participants to join the next session, which will start at 5 p.m. sharp. And that's a session that I think all of us are looking forward to. It's a session that's going to be run by Richard Chambers, entitled Agents of Change, Internal Auditors in an Era of Disruption. And we will also have Ms. Narina Neja do a fireside chat with Mr. Chambers once he finishes his opening remarks. So with that, thank you once again, gentlemen. And with that, I will close this session.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Bursin.
you.
So much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Basil. Thanks. Bye.